On a freezing night in Denver, a wounded German shepherd was found tied to railroad tracks, barely able to move. Yet, even as a train rushed toward him, the dog refused to let go of a small canvas bag clutched between his paws. When the train finally stopped and people rushed to help, they discovered something unbelievable inside that bag. An old recorder containing a confession linked to a murder that had haunted the city for 10 years. Someone had tried to destroy the truth that night, but they didn't count on one thing: the loyalty of a dog who refused to let justice disappear. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe miracles sometimes arrive on 4 paws, don't forget to subscribe. A bitter winter wind swept across the quiet railroad outskirts of Denver, snow dusting the steel tracks while the distant hum of a freight train echoed through the cold night. Michael Carter had driven trains across the American West for almost 20 years, yet nights like this always stirred something restless inside him. At 46, Michael was a broad-shouldered man with weathered skin and a thick brown beard that had begun to gray along the edges. His eyes were sharp and patient, the kind earned from decades of staring into darkness while guiding thousands of tons of steel through lonely landscapes. Among the rail crew, Michael was known as calm under pressure, a man who rarely panicked. That steadiness came from a painful memory years ago when he had once failed to stop in time to avoid hitting a deer on the tracks. The sound of that impact had haunted him ever since. Tonight, the freight train roared steadily through the frozen outskirts of Denver, its headlights carving a pale tunnel through drifting snow. Michael leaned slightly forward in his seat, scanning the rails ahead the way he always did. Then he saw it. A shape. At first, it was just a dark blur lying across the track, barely visible through the snow and mist. His pulse tightened instantly. "Something's on the rails," Michael muttered, his hand already reaching for the brake lever. His instincts screamed before his mind could fully process what he was seeing. He slammed the emergency brake. The train shrieked violently as metal wheels scraped against frozen steel. Sparks flickered along the rails as the massive freight engine struggled to slow its momentum. The sound tore through the silent night like thunder. Michael's heart pounded. Please stop. Please stop. The train shuddered as it finally ground to a halt several yards before the dark shape. For a moment, Michael simply sat there, breathing heavily, staring through the windshield. The headlights illuminated the object clearly now. It wasn't debris. It wasn't an animal carcass either. It moved. "God, what is that?" one of the crewmen whispered behind him. Within seconds, Michael and 2 railroad workers jumped down from the engine and hurried along the icy tracks. The cold air burned in Michael's lungs as he approached. And then he saw it clearly. A dog. A large German shepherd lay on the frozen rails, its body trembling weakly against the snow. The animal looked to be about 6 years old, with thick sable-colored fur, black along the back and dark brown along the sides, but the once beautiful coat was now soaked with dirt and streaks of blood. Rough rope was tied tightly around the dog's torso and legs. The animal had clearly been restrained. Michael slowed his steps, his stomach twisting. The dog's ears twitched faintly as the men approached. Its amber eyes reflected the train's headlights, dull with exhaustion yet still fiercely alert. But that wasn't the strangest part. Between its front paws, the dog clutched a small, worn canvas bag. The animal's body curled protectively around it. One of the workers, a young man named Luis with a thin build and nervous energy, crouched carefully. "Easy there, buddy," Luis said softly. The moment his hand moved toward the bag, the dog released a low, broken growl. Not aggressive. Protective. Michael knelt slowly beside the animal. Up close he could see shallow cuts along the dog's ribs and a deeper wound on its shoulder where blood had dried into the fur. Someone had hurt this animal. badly, and still it refused to let go of that bag. The dog shifted weakly, tightening its paws around the canvas. Michael felt something heavy settle in his chest. This wasn't random. Someone had put the dog here, and whatever was inside that bag, the animal was guarding it with its life. Luis whispered, "Should we move it?" Michael shook his head slowly. "Not yet." The dog looked up at him then. For a brief moment their eyes met. There was fear there, pain, but also determination. A strange thought crossed Michael's mind. The dog knew exactly what it was doing. Far away, the faint sound of approaching sirens cut through the night. The police were on their way. And beneath the cold Denver sky, the wounded German shepherd continued clutching the small canvas bag, as if the fate of something far greater than itself depended on it. No one standing on those tracks that night could yet imagine what that bag would reveal. But before the night ended, the truth hidden inside it would begin to change everything. The night had grown colder by the time the police sirens finally cut through the silence of the frozen rail yard. Flashing blue and red lights painted the snow with restless color as a Denver police cruiser rolled slowly beside the halted freight train. The officer who stepped out was Sergeant Daniel Brooks, a man whose presence carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen too much darkness in the world. Daniel was 42, tall and broad through the shoulders, with sharp cheekbones and a square jaw lined with short black stubble. His dark hair was cropped close, already touched with gray at the temples. People in the Denver Police Department often said Daniel looked like a man carved from stone, calm, deliberate, difficult to shake. That calmness had been shaped years earlier when he worked a missing persons case that ended too late to save the victim. Since then, Daniel had developed a stubborn habit of never letting mysteries rest. He approached the track slowly, boots crunching over frozen gravel. Michael Carter stepped forward to meet him. "Glad you came quick," the train driver said, gesturing toward the dog lying weakly across the rails. Daniel's eyes followed the beam of a flashlight until it landed on the injured German shepherd. For a moment he said nothing. The dog lay curled protectively around the canvas bag, its breathing shallow. Blood had dried into the thick fur along its shoulder, and the rope binding its torso had dug painfully into its skin. Yet its amber eyes followed every movement around the bag. Not fear, guarding. Daniel crouched down, studying the animal. "Easy, boy," he murmured quietly. The German shepherd lifted its head slightly. Its ears twitched, and a faint growl slipped from its throat. But it didn't snap or lunge. It simply tightened its paws around the bag. Daniel noticed the detail immediately. "That bag means something to him," he said. Luis nodded nervously. He wouldn't let us touch it. A white rescue van pulled up beside the tracks as the veterinary response team arrived. Leading them was Dr. Hannah Keller, a woman in her mid-30s with pale skin, sharp blue eyes, and shoulder-length blonde hair tied into a messy ponytail beneath a wool hat. She was slender and quick-moving, with the calm efficiency of someone who had treated hundreds of injured animals. Years earlier, she had worked disaster rescues during Colorado wildfires, and since then she carried a quiet gentleness that animals seemed to trust. Hannah knelt beside the dog immediately. "Oh, you poor, brave thing," she whispered. She examined the rope carefully while one of her assistants prepared a stretcher. The dog flinched weakly when they tried to move the bag. Hannah looked at Daniel. "He won't let go." Daniel leaned closer. For a long moment the officer and the wounded animal simply stared at each other. Something passed between them, an understanding that didn't require words. "You protected this for a reason," Daniel murmured softly. Carefully, he slid his hand beneath the canvas strap. The dog gave a low, warning growl. Daniel didn't pull. Instead, he rested his hand gently on the animal's neck. "You did your job," he whispered. "Let us take it from here." For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then the dog's growl faded. Its exhausted head lowered slowly onto the cold steel rail. Hannah moved quickly. Within moments, the rescue team lifted the dog onto the stretcher and carried it toward the van. Only then did Daniel finally open the bag. Inside was a small cassette recorder, scratched and worn with age. And beneath it lay a photograph. Daniel picked up the picture and brushed away the frost clinging to its edges. The image showed a young woman in her 20s, smiling beneath a bright summer sky. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her eyes held the warm confidence of someone who believed the world was still a safe place. Daniel felt a strange tightening in his chest. He recognized her, or rather, he recognized the case. He turned the recorder over in his hand. Old, very old, the kind investigators rarely saw anymore. Luis shifted nervously beside him. "What do you think it is?" Daniel pressed the play button. The cassette whirred softly. Static crackled through the tiny speaker. Then a man's voice emerged, hoarse, trembling, almost swallowed by the hiss of the tape. "If anyone ever hears this, it means Emily Harper is dead because of me." The words seemed to freeze the air around them. Michael Carter stared in shock. Luis whispered, "Did he just say, Emily Harper?" Daniel didn't answer immediately, because he already knew. 10 years ago, Emily Harper had vanished without a trace in Denver. The investigation had consumed the city for months before collapsing into silence. A cold case, a mystery that had never been solved. Until now. Daniel looked toward the rescue van where the wounded German shepherd was being loaded inside. The dog had risked its life protecting this bag. And suddenly, Daniel understood something chilling. Someone had tied that animal to the tracks. Someone who knew exactly what was inside. And someone who had wanted it destroyed forever. The Denver Police Department sat under a heavy winter sky, its brick walls glowing faintly beneath the yellow streetlights that reflected off fresh snow. Inside the quiet evidence room, Sergeant Daniel Brooks sat at a metal table, the old cassette recorder resting between his large hands. The building hummed softly with the distant chatter of night shift officers, but Daniel barely noticed. His dark eyes remained fixed on the recorder like a hunter studying an unfamiliar trail. Across from him sat Detective Marcus Hale, a man in his early 50s with deep lines carved into his face and thick gray eyebrows that always seemed permanently furrowed. Marcus was tall, but slightly stooped from decades leaning over crime scenes and paperwork. His once black hair had faded into steel gray, and a rough mustache framed his upper lip. Among detectives, Marcus had a reputation for patience. 25 years earlier, he had been one of the first investigators assigned to the Emily Harper disappearance, a case that had slowly turned into one of Denver's most frustrating unsolved mysteries. The failure to solve it had weighed on him for years. Marcus rubbed his temples as the recorder clicked to life again. Static filled the small room. Then the man's voice returned. "I didn't mean for it to happen. Emily wasn't supposed to die." Daniel felt the words settle into the room like falling stones. The voice was strained and breathless, the kind of confession spoken by someone terrified of being discovered. Marcus leaned forward slowly. "That voice," he muttered. "It's familiar." Daniel listened carefully as the tape continued. "I buried her outside the city, near the old warehouse road. No one will ever find her." The tape crackled violently. There was the sound of something falling, a chair scraping, then a muffled shout, and suddenly, silence. The tape spun for several seconds before stopping completely. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "That wasn't a confession meant for police," he said quietly. "That was a man recording his own guilt." Daniel nodded slowly. "And someone tried to stop him." For a moment, neither man spoke. Outside the interrogation room window, snow drifted silently past the glass. Finally, Daniel pushed back from the table. "We reopen the case." Marcus studied him carefully. "You realize what that means?" Daniel did. Cold cases were difficult enough, but reopening one after 10 years meant digging through old evidence, old suspects, and old mistakes. Still, Daniel had already made his decision. Meanwhile, across the city at Riverside Veterinary Clinic, the wounded German Shepherd lay on a padded examination table beneath bright surgical lights. The clinic belonged to Dr. Hannah Keller, who had refused to leave the dog's side since it arrived. The animal was stronger now, though still weak from blood loss. Its sable coat had been cleaned, revealing deep muscle lines beneath the fur. The dog was large, nearly 90 pounds, and despite its injuries it carried the alert intelligence typical of trained working dogs. Hannah carefully trimmed away the last strands of rope from around the dog's torso. "There we go," she whispered gently. The German Shepherd lifted its head slightly. As she examined the collar beneath its fur, Hannah noticed something engraved on the metal tag. She leaned closer. "Rex," she read softly. The name stirred a faint recognition in her memory. She stepped toward the computer and quickly searched the old missing person file that Daniel had sent over. A photo appeared on the screen. Emily Harper. And beside her in the picture, the same German Shepherd. Hannah felt a chill. Rex had belonged to Emily 10 years ago. Later that night, Daniel arrived at the clinic carrying the recorder in a small evidence bag. The moment he stepped into the examination room, Rex's ears twitched. The dog struggled weakly to lift its head. Daniel approached slowly. "I brought something you should hear," he said quietly. He placed the recorder on the table and pressed play. Static filled the room again. Then the trembling voice spoke. "If anyone finds this, it means Emily Harper is dead because of me." Rex reacted instantly. The dog let out a sharp bark and attempted to rise despite the bandages wrapped around its shoulder. Its growl deepened as the tape continued. The animal's reaction was unmistakable. Recognition. Daniel looked at Hannah. He knows that voice. The realization settled heavily between them. Somewhere in Denver, the man who had confessed on that tape was still alive. And Rex might be the only witness who could lead them to him. Snow fell steadily across the empty industrial outskirts of Denver, covering the frozen ground in a pale, silent blanket, while wind whispered through the rusted skeletons of abandoned warehouses. Sergeant Daniel Brooks stood beside an unmarked police SUV, studying the dark structure ahead of him. The building looked forgotten by time. Corrugated metal walls eaten by rust, windows shattered long ago, and a sagging roof weighed down by years of Colorado winters. The location matched the vague directions spoken in the cassette confession, near the old warehouse road outside the city. Beside Daniel stood Detective Marcus Hale, his heavy coat pulled tight against the cold. His breath formed white clouds as he spoke. "This place has been empty for almost 15 years, Marcus said, scanning the area carefully. Back when Emily disappeared, a trucking company used it for storage." Daniel nodded slowly. Something about the silence of the place felt wrong. Too quiet. Behind them, another vehicle door opened. A tall man stepped out carrying a portable evidence kit. This was forensic specialist Aaron Patel, a lean man in his early 30s with sharp dark eyes and neatly trimmed black hair. Aaron wore thin rectangular glasses that constantly slipped down his nose whenever he worked. Though younger than most investigators on the scene, Aaron had earned a reputation in Denver's forensic unit for noticing details others overlooked. Years earlier, he had helped solve a complicated kidnapping case by identifying a single fiber caught beneath a victim's fingernail. Since then, detectives trusted his instincts. Aaron surveyed the warehouse with careful curiosity. If the tape was telling the truth, he said calmly, whatever he buried should still be here. Daniel opened the rusted door with a loud creak. Inside, the air smelled of damp metal and dust. Flashlights cut through the darkness as the team stepped across cracked concrete floors. Old crates and broken shelving lined the walls like ghosts from another decade. Marcus pointed toward a section of ground near the back wall. There, he said, that dirt looks disturbed. Indeed, one patch of earth had been roughly covered with gravel, darker than the surrounding floor. Aaron knelt down and brushed away loose debris with gloved hands. His eyes narrowed. Definitely dug up once, he confirmed. Daniel felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the feeling that came whenever a long-buried truth was about to surface. Let's see what he tried to hide, he said. The officers began digging. Within minutes, the shovel struck metal with a dull clang. Aaron cleared away the soil carefully until a small rectangular steel box appeared beneath the dirt. Daniel crouched beside it and lifted the lid. Inside were several items wrapped in faded cloth. A silver necklace, a driver's license, a small journal with Emily Harper's name written across the first page. Marcus exhaled slowly. This is her, he said quietly. For 10 years, the case had lived only as photographs and paperwork. Now it was real again. But before anyone could speak further, headlights suddenly blazed through the warehouse windows. An engine roared outside. Daniel spun toward the door. A black pickup truck skidded into view across the snowy lot. The driver's door flew open. A man jumped out holding a gasoline container. He was tall and heavily built, with a thick beard covering most of his face and wild eyes that darted nervously toward the officers inside the building. Without hesitation, he began splashing fuel along the wooden walls. "Hey!" Marcus shouted. The man didn't answer. Instead, he struck a lighter. Flames exploded along the gasoline trail. Fire rushed up the walls in seconds. "Out! Everyone out!" Daniel yelled. Smoke filled the warehouse as the team rushed outside into the freezing wind. The bearded man leapt back into the pickup truck and slammed the accelerator. Snow sprayed behind the tires as the vehicle tore down the empty road. Daniel didn't hesitate. He jumped into the SUV. Marcus climbed into the passenger seat. The siren roared to life as Daniel pushed the engine hard. The chase cut through dark country roads, headlights slicing through thick snowfall. The pickup swerved wildly ahead of them. "He's desperate," Marcus muttered. Daniel kept his eyes locked on the fleeing vehicle. Desperate men made mistakes, and this one was running straight into them. After several tense miles, the pickup lost traction on an icy curve. The truck spun violently before crashing into a roadside ditch. Daniel and Marcus were already out of the SUV before the vehicle stopped moving. The bearded man stumbled from the wreck, trying to run, but he didn't get far. Daniel tackled him into the snow. Cold metal cuffs snapped around the man's wrists. Breathing heavily, Daniel turned the suspect onto his back. The man's frightened eyes stared up at him. And in that moment, Daniel realized something chilling. The voice from the cassette. It sounded exactly like this man. Dawn arrived slowly over Denver, pale winter light spreading across the snow-covered city, while the storm clouds of the night finally began to thin. Inside an interrogation room at the Denver Police Department, the man captured on the icy roadside sat in silence, his cuffed hands resting heavily on the steel table. Up close, the suspect looked older than he had in the chaos of the chase. His name was Thomas Hale, a businessman in his late 40s whose carefully styled public image had once appeared in charity galas and corporate fundraisers across Denver. He had a thick beard trimmed with expensive precision, sharp gray eyes, and a confident jawline that suggested a man used to control. But now the confidence was gone. His shoulders sagged slightly, and the dark circles beneath his eyes revealed a man who had not slept peacefully in years. Across the table sat Sergeant Daniel Brooks. Daniel's posture was calm but unyielding. His broad frame filled the chair like a wall that would not move. Years of investigation had taught him patience, but this case had stirred something deeper in him. 10 years of silence. 10 years of unanswered questions for a woman whose life had vanished without explanation. Daniel slid the cassette recorder across the table. "You know what this is," he said quietly. Thomas Hale stared at the machine as though it were a ghost. Daniel pressed play. Static crackled softly through the room. Then the trembling confession filled the air once again. "If anyone finds this, it means Emily Harper is dead because of me." The color drained from Hale's face. For several seconds he said nothing. Then his shoulders slowly collapsed forward. "I didn't plan it," he muttered hoarsely. Daniel watched him carefully. "Then, tell me what you did." Hale closed his eyes. His voice came out low and uneven. "Emily worked for my company. She discovered financial records she wasn't supposed to see. Money that wasn't legal. She threatened to go to the police." He swallowed hard. "I tried to scare her. We met outside the warehouse to talk, but she refused to back down. She said she had already recorded everything." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "So you killed her?" Hale nodded slowly. "It happened fast. I panicked." The room fell silent. After a moment, Hale continued. "She had a dog with her, that German shepherd, Rex. When everything happened, the dog attacked me. I hit it. I thought I killed it." Daniel's eyes darkened, but Rex survived. Hale gave a hollow laugh. "Yeah, stronger than I expected." He rubbed his face with shaking hands. "Emily had recorded my confession during the argument. The tape was inside her bag. I tried to find it, but the dog grabbed the bag and ran." For years, Hale explained, he had searched for the missing evidence. But Rex had disappeared. "I thought the dog died somewhere," Haley said bitterly. But it didn't. Outside the interrogation room, Detective Marcus Hale stood beside Dr. Hannah Keller, who had come to the station with quiet determination. Beside her, lying calmly on a padded blanket, was Rex. The German shepherd looked stronger now. His wounds had been bandaged carefully, and his sable coat had regained some of its natural shine. Despite everything he had endured, the dog sat with steady dignity, his amber eyes watching the hallway with calm intelligence. When Daniel opened the interrogation door, Rex slowly lifted his head. For a moment, the man and the dog looked at each other across the room. Thomas Hale's face tightened with fear. "That dog," he whispered. Daniel placed the recorder back into an evidence bag. "It guarded the truth for 10 years. Hale said nothing more. Later that afternoon, as sunlight finally broke through the clouds above Denver, the official report was filed. The disappearance of Emily Harper was no longer a mystery. Her killer had confessed, and the evidence that made it possible had been protected by a wounded dog who refused to abandon his duty. Rex rested quietly beside Dr. Hannah Keller, his breathing slow and peaceful. After 10 long years, the truth had finally come home. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder from the sky. Sometimes they walk quietly on 4 wounded paws. On a freezing night in Denver, when the world believed a truth had been buried forever, A wounded dog refused to let go of a small canvas bag. 10 years of silence could not erase loyalty. 10 years of darkness could not silence justice. And in the end, what saved the truth was not power, not wealth, not even the law itself. It was faith, courage, and a loyal heart that refused to give up. Perhaps that is how God works in this world. Not always through grand signs, but through small acts of devotion, through the quiet bravery of those who refuse to abandon what is right. Sometimes God places the truth in unexpected guardians, an ordinary person, a stranger, or even a wounded dog who refuses to surrender. Rex did not know he was saving a case. He only knew he was protecting something that belonged to the person he loved. And maybe that is the miracle. In our own lives, we all face moments when it would be easier to walk away, easier to stay silent, easier to forget what is right. But stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of loyalty can change someone's destiny. If this story touched your heart, take a moment today to show kindness to someone, because you never know how far one act of goodness can travel. And if you believe that faith, compassion, and loyalty still matter in this world, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I would truly love to hear where you are watching from and what part of this story stayed with you the most. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking the video, sharing it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribing to the channel so you never miss the next story of courage and compassion. May God watch over you and your family. May He bring peace to your home, strength to your heart, and light to your path. And wherever you are watching from tonight, may you always remember that even in the darkest moments, miracles can still find their way to us.